Hey y'all, hey, welcome back to another Fear Street review. It is I, Sheree, and I am solo again. I am here today, blah, blah. I am here today to talk about The Crowded Room on Apple TV Plus. I just finished it after an on again, off again binge over the last few months, weeks, I don't know time. And I'm here to tell you what I saw because it's billed as a thriller mystery a lot of the time. And so I went in. I'm going to warn you right here, right now. We're gonna have spoilers because it's a story, and most of my notes are wrapped up in the story, obviously, because I'm a nerd. So if you don't like spoilers, you might want to like go ahead and go out, and then come back after you've seen it or you've seen enough to know what it is, because I think that you figure out what's going on early enough, to where you can probably be like, yeah, okay, I can hear what she has to say now. Anywho's, anyways, here's our synopsis today. um, a psychological thriller set in Manhattan in the summer of 1979, when a young man is arrested for a shocking crime and an unlikely investigator must solve the mystery behind it. So I go into things not knowing anything. I don't like to have preconceived judgments. I don't have to have preconceived ideas so I could speak today. And so I just knew Amanda Seyfried and Tom Holland were going to be there. And like, why not? I like both of those actors. Let's see what they do. So I was very, very happy to get an Emmy Rossum bonus because she plays Tom Holland's mom, because that's Hollywood. But yes, I was living for the acting. I think the acting is probably one of the major high points of this series. I think that getting to see what they all bring to the table and how they interact with each other, because like it's a story, and I'm gonna get more into that as we get into this conversation. But anywho's, another thing I think is working for this show. Again, I'm stalling people who have not hit stop but hate spoilers. Another thing I think is working for this show is that it does not sensationalize a lot of the things it's dealing with. Like, for instance, it's dealing with a lot of trauma. It's dealing with a lot of sexual assault of children, mental illness, and an attempted suicide. But it doesn't take the gross way out that would have me yelling, "Why are we here?" as a people. Instead, it sort of does it in a way that's it's weirdly dignified and at times weirdly beautiful, which is weird to say. And that's because of the direction and like the editing and like the visuals that they give you along with these things happening. Instead of being in that moment, you like retreat into this person's mind, or you go somewhere else. And it's I think that is working for it. And I think that that helps me figure out what the show was actually wanting to do, instead of giving me the things that I can like check off and be like, these are good scripts. This is a great written show. It was really focused on telling a specific kind of story and doing this thing with empathy that I think is like really cool. I think that it was effective in these moments, more so than probably what I would have given 10 episodes to, because okay, so like for the majority of the show, you know what's going on. I figured it out in episode one. Again, I went in not knowing anything, and I was like, "Oh, this person has multiple personalities. Cool, cool, cool." Um, and I was like, "Okay, but now what?" And we just kept sort of going with that and going with that, and we kept acting like it was going to be a big reveal. And each time they had a big reveal, because they had a few, I was like, "Well, we already knew that." And then we go back to waiting for Danny, who's played by Tom Holland, to understand what's going on. Even when Raya, the therapist, played by Amanda Seyfried, is like, "Don't you find that a coincidence? Don't you think that's a thing?" And so we're just sort of watching this game that becomes sort of frustrating, because you just want them to go ahead and get to the point where he's in the know so we can move forward. But instead, we sort of stay in first gear until episode 7, which is finally like, Danny, look at the tape. This is you. This is not the other girl. This is you. You are the other girl. And I wish that we could have gotten more of that, because for the majority of the show, it feels like a very well written after school special with some bad words. I'm not gonna lie. I wanted it to find its footing and like do something, but I think again, it was very much set on telling the story from a specific way of dignity that we don't get. And so it wasn't really out here trying to give us something to like wow us and get us talking to the water cooler. Which I respect, but as an audience member, I was like, but like give them more, because I see your cast, I see that they can do the things, and I want to give them the things. And to be fair, the last 3 episodes, when once we have Danny in on it, they do get a little bit more intriguing, if that makes sense. Because again, this is a very weird story to unpack and to talk about, and so that might also be part of the hesitation of figuring out how to make it a little bit more engaging. Because again, I think that it had great intentions, which is why it's hard to piss on it. You see the work, but like also we could have like fine-tuned it to make it either quicker or to like get us to something else, because this feels like this whole season could have been maybe 2 or 3 seasons, and we could have gotten to where we ended up a little bit sooner. But anyways, it was really frustrating, like I said, watching them go back and forth, even though they are two great actors, Amanda and Tom. But watching them go back and forth for 6 episodes, sort of doing the same thing as he's telling more of the story, and we've already figured out what's going on, but he's not figured it out. Especially because we're in an era where we've seen other shows deal with not this kind of trauma specifically, but trauma. Like for instance, I May Destroy You. Like, we definitely had an episode watching her figure out what we found out. And when she finds out, that was devastating. And then, like, from there, we were able to move forward in the story of what she's going to do now that she has this knowledge of what happened to her and where that's going. But again, I think that this one was very set in doing the one thing. And it did that thing very well, but it just did it over the course of 10 episodes and sort of kept retreading the same waters, which was a little bit frustrating as a viewer. And it also just did a bit of a disservice to the actors, because again, you have all these great performances, but they're doing the same thing over and over and over, and so you're just like and that's why it took me a while to finish it, because I wasn't sure I was going to finish it, even though I kept hoping we would find the other thing to give it texture. I kept hoping we would find the other thing to give it something, because it's just kind of a flat line. And then like the last 3 episodes happen, and it's kind of the inevitable. I think it was the people who did Succession. I think it was Jesse Armstrong himself who said tragedy is the inevitable. And so there's not a real true happy ending, but you also know that like our lead's gonna be okay-ish. And so like there was never anything to be like, I'm concerned, I have stakes. It was just an exercise in empathy and caring, which of course you're gonna care. Our lead looks like he's 15, even though he's got to be pushing 20 something. He's been Spider-Man for a decade. So like, of course we care. Of course the people being like, he'll get eaten up in prison. We have to figure out what is wrong with him and get him in on this. Those stakes are the only stakes, and they work, but also it's when we have nothing else and we know it's not going to be okay. It's just like, why are we here? What are we doing? We also, because we're so busy trying to just sort of like keep this flat line and keep this one idea and nothing else matters, we have a lot of characters who get to like have a cool monologue, but we don't really like give that any other grace or thought. And so like you have like a cool monologue about how it is to be a queer Black man in the 70s in New York. And you have the Black lawyer who's like, I see Black kids go to jail for much easier things than what this kid did. I'm not gonna make some white kid get off of this. And you have even the therapist being like, it's hard being a woman in the medical field. But they get that one monologue and then we just don't talk about it again. And so it's like there was enough thought to cast these people. There was enough thought to give them a moment. But because we're so focused on our lead, not understanding what is happening to him, but we're also not really moving that forward or making it interesting, it's just frustrating because there's all these missed opportunities. Speaking of missed opportunities, I've not read The Minds of Billy Milligan, which was written by Daniel Keyes, and it's what inspired the show. But I did Google the name Billy Milligan, and he committed some very horrible crimes, which I think if we'd kept more of his actual story, that could have helped us find a way to like do something that would have been worth leaning forward. I'm not usually pro put more trauma and assault on screen, but because of the way that this subject matter was handled here with dignity and grace, and it was more of an art form as opposed to gratuitous, men have been here, they're awful. I think we could have had those conversations, which would have been interesting, but we were so focused on getting sympathy for Danny, which he's already got built in. He's Tom Holland. We don't have to worry about people feeling bad for Tom Holland. We're gonna feel bad for him no matter what, okay? But like the mystery conversation that could have happened makes me sad because again, this person did some awful crimes, like awful, awful crimes. And so that goes against the idea that these personalities, which is usually what we hear when we hear DID or multiple personality disorder, however you want to call it, these people, these personalities are created to protect the person, to help the person. And so Billy having people who are murdering people and assaulting people does not compute for what the definition usually is. So either there's a different diagnosis or there's a different form of this personality disorder, and we could be diving into that, or we could be asking if we believe Billy, who again in this series is Danny. We could be asking if we believe him, or if we think somebody's capable of those crimes, but also capable of lying like this. And if we do believe him, that means that we have the interesting conversation of, do we let this person go, even though they did all this awful stuff? So somebody in them is a menace to society. Do the survivors and the victims' families forgive because they weren't themselves? Like, these are things I think that could have given this so much to do and to grow, and to give the actors so much to work with, and give us so much to think about and unpack as audience members. I think that this could have been a very interesting and engaging show overall. Uh, Again, it was not that show though. uh, I also just really, really, really think that it would have given Tom Holland more to do, because again, part of the reason we are tuning into this is to see what he can do outside of the Marvel Disney universe, because like, he comes from theater, so we have high expectations that he can do so much, and instead we were like, we're gonna feel bad for you because you're a kid and this isn't your fault. And it's like, yes, but what else? And so I would have loved to had seen something, even if it is just like a momentary I don't believe him, or maybe he should be away. And I think that investigating these other avenues would have also given his last cryptic line at the end of the show a little bit more weight. Because again, we're just like, we're ending it on a happy, positive note. And so there's going to be a happy, positive situation with that last line. Or we're going to leave it vaguely open in case we get a second season, which I don't think we need a second season for what we've done here. But again, that's just me. Anywho, there's some really gorgeous imagery. If I've not talked about that enough, I really love what they did with the fireflies for Danny's situation, and what that means for that character, or what I think it means for that character, because art is interpretive, so we can all have different interpretations. But for what I think they mean for somebody lost in their own mind, I think that's fucking beautiful. I think that it's just so much with fires in all cylinders when it comes to the artistic direction of this show. I love the editing. I love the music. I loved most of the costumes and what they say about the people, because there were some stories been given, especially for Emmy Rossum, who is this mother who refuses to acknowledge her complicity in what has happened to her child and refuses to stick up for her kid, but she also needs to look like she is got her shit together. And so I love those moments where her being like, I have my shit together and I'm going to sneak to the back of this courtroom, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let my husband keep doing what he's doing. It's just, there's so much here, and it gave me such a mood, and it was such a period piece, and it was a vibe 10s across the board for all of the people involved in the artistic direction, cinematography, everybody. I did not look up all 9 billion of those names, obviously, because we would be here all night, but I think that the artistic vision, I see the artistic vision and I see the acting, and I think that those two things are fighting a script that never really gets into second gear. And so it's a little bit frustrating, unfortunately, because again, I knew nothing going in, but the first episode, I was like, what personalities? I also really, if I've not said it, I love the theatricality of the way the personalities step forward before we know their personalities, which again, it's really easy to clock that in the first episode. I think that is done beautifully. And so when they're doing the reveal at the end, you're just like, yeah, I knew that. And I thought that was really cool. And people, I guess, who might not have been paying attention maybe would be like, oh, gagged. But we were not. I think this show misses so many cool opportunities to explore so many different things about the character they have created too. For instance, Danny's personalities are definitely seeing so many people. And so we never really question, like, is Danny a queer character? Because like whenever it's brought up in therapy, Danny's like, no, I don't want to talk about that. But like, we don't know. And maybe the writer's room was like, you know what, we're not going to do that because maybe we're not equipped. I don't know the writers. I don't know that staff. But I think that it opens up some engaging conversations. Like, why is one of Danny's most prominent characters a woman who's the one who has all the sex for him for the most part? And she's like, I see guys and girls. And I'm just like, good for you, sis. Why is the other one that we know has sex only sleeping with men? Again, I think that we have to ask our character that we've created questions, whether or not they are based on the person that we are inspired by. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I want to know what y'all think. If you watch this show, please let me know what you think because again, I think that there was so much going for this show, but it never really like unleashed itself. It kept holding itself back. And that's a little bit frustrating for me as a viewer because I'm rooting for it. I was still rooting for it even when I knew where it was going to end. I was still rooting for it to give me something, some sort of a surprise, but instead we get great acting in something that's destined to be not to keep harping on theater references, but it feels like a show, those shows that keep getting revived. And they're just like, people know what it is. The show's been around for 80 years. We can do whatever we want now, and it's fun and fine. But because this was not one of those, this was a first outing. I just wish that we had been like, this reveal is a real reveal, as opposed to it's the thing we've been showing you the whole time. Thanks. And it goes out with a whimper. I I'm giving this a 3, but again, it's mostly because it's gorgeous to look at and there's so much great acting. There's so many really cool acting moments that I wish could have been part of a bigger story or could have been part of something that was a little bit more engaging. I keep saying engaging because I this was never going to be a fun story because again, it's about trauma, but I think we could have done something a little bit less TV 14, a little bit more psychological, sophisticated for the adults. And again, that doesn't mean we need like more sex scenes or anything because I don't care either way. If they're needed, yay. If they're not, yay. But I think that we could have done some stuff with what we've been given here because we took something inspired by somebody who was a very, very complicated case. That's what I will say. That was a very complicated case. I've not done more than a couple of Google searches on this person who's no longer with us, but I think that his case does have things that we could be discussing and we can have dialogues about. And I would be curious to know how people respond to those because, like, we're not all going to agree if we believe the actual Billy Milligan or not. We're not going to feel that empathy that we have for this Danny that we have in the show for the actual Billy Milligan. Um, I think that could have been exciting, and I think it would have been a joy to see Tom Holland step into a role that's a bit more outside of the box. But yeah, like I was saying, if you want to see Amanda Seyfried do some not lawyering, doctoring. Wow, I'm sleepy. If you want to see her do some doctoring, and if you want to see her and Tom go back and forth across the table for a few episodes, you want to see Emmy Rossum enter the chat and be like, "Hi, I'm not Fiona from Shameless anymore. This is your time to shine." Get it. Again, I think it's a 3, but it's not like it's a 3 because it's so engaging and you have to see it right now and we got to talk about it right now. I'm just processing it because I'm nerdy and nosy and I am always interested in psychological things. If those are your bags, you might also finish it eventually, but it's not like something you're gonna be like, yeah, let me revisit this. Yeah, this is whatever that gets you excited to see something again. It's more like I saw that. I'm thinking about the things that could have been. I'm thinking about the things that I would like to see. And I kind of want to read the book, even though I don't do a whole lot of true crime. I think I would like to know more about the actual person that inspired this and what all went on into that. Because we all know that the further back you go, the less kind people are about mental illness, whether or not this person had mental illness or not. We don't know. I don't know, anyways. The court said he did, and they let him not go to prison. But again, I was not born. Anywho's, if you agree, if you disagree, you can put that in the comments, but be respectful. Because if you're not respectful, then you make an enemy, and you don't want an enemy on Fear Street, because I'm a Gemini. And if Trent were here, he'd say stay fierce out there. He's not, though. So I'm going to say that. And I'm also going to say bye.